Hi everyone, thanks for coming this afternoon. My name's Anthony Accurso. I'm a junior at Christendom College, and I'm happy to be here today to introduce everyone. And for just a couple housekeeping things, exits. There's the exits that are in the back of the room. There's also the exit that's behind me. There's restrooms in the hallway to our rear. And this event is being put on by the Front Royal Catholic Civic Education Group. They're a Catholic organization here locally to help get people involved in local politics and civics. And they have an email list, and if you want more information, there's their email address right there, frontroyalcatholics@yahoo.com. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our speaker for this evening, who happens to be my mother. I'm from Arizona, she's from Arizona, and that's where I grew up. We've lived there for the last 16 years. Mom grew up in Southern California, and actually came out here and lived in Northern Virginia for a few years, where she met my dad, and had me over in Manassas in the Fairfax area. And we've been in Arizona ever since. Since then, she's been extremely involved in the pro-life movement in Arizona, both locally and nationally on some issues. And while she's been in Arizona working in the pro-life movement, she's been the executive director of the First Way Crisis Pregnancy Center in downtown Phoenix. She's also been the practice manager of Morningstar OBGYN, which is a pro-life Catholic OBGYN in the Southeast Valley of Phoenix. And now she's here to speak today about what we've been up to more recently. So without further ado, my mother, Christina Accurso.
Well, I've been introduced a lot, but never by my own child. Thank you, Anthony. What a gift it is to be here today and to see all of you. I love Front Royal, and I got to spend some time here, spending a short period of time at Christendom College. And so your heart, if you've gone to Christendom or you work at Christendom, remains at Christendom. So when I came to Front Royal this week, it was just a joy to be there and to be there for Mass today. It was great. So as my son said, my name is Christina Accurso. I'm currently the Executive Director for the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program for the state of Arizona. And I will tell you how that happened in just a few minutes. But I wanted to let you know I want to keep my presentation as brief as possible so that we can make this really a conversation. Because I want to take your questions, especially when I travel throughout the country. There's so many questions, but those of us who live in Arizona are living it. So I don't want to go too far into the weeds without making sure you can understand a little bit more about what's happening. How many of you have heard about their school choice news in Arizona this past year? Anybody? Oh, awesome. You guys are watching the news. This is great. So I want to talk about first, what is school choice? That's much quicker there, sorry. What is school choice and what is an empowerment scholarship account? School choice is definitely used very broadly, but I'm going to talk about it as an Arizonan. So honestly, it is when a parent has the ability and the freedom to send their child to whatever form of education that they want, need, and deserve. Everybody learns very uniquely. Well, there's not always freedom if you can't afford it. There's not always freedom if you don't have a local private school, micro school, or some type of support for homeschooling nearby. So really, the freedom of school choice matters of what kind of resources you have in your area. In Arizona, about 25 years ago, we started with charter schools. So we have the public school system, the district system, and then we started with alternatives, which are charter schools, which are also known as public charter schools, but they're privately run. And entrepreneurs have started their own charter schools. With the public funding, you still have to abide by state standards and things. And then about 20 years ago, they started a tax credit, which has been awesome. So any taxpayer in the state can give a certain portion of their tax dollars either to a third party or to a third party with a recommended child's name on it, right? So it goes directly to your child. This year, a married couple can give $2,600 of their state tax money, their liability, directly to a child, directly to benefit their education. So my son Anthony and our daughter Catherine have benefited from that school choice program over the years. And I think it's, if I added it all up, my husband and I recently did, it's like $160,000. And that's you just asking your friends and family you can't give it to your own child, but just your friends and family to donate your tax dollars and mark my child's name on it. So that's how we afforded the private Catholic schools that they went to. Our son Dominic, on the other hand, he actually had an ESA, Empowerment Scholarship Account, because he had a particular learning disability. So, like I said, tax credits were about 20 years ago. On the scene about 10, 11 years ago is the ESA. So parents were advocating for their children, wanting to be able to take the state tax dollars that the state already sends to public schools and just send it to the parents. Please, just give it to us, and we will educate our children. So these are separate programs, but I'm going to primarily today talk about the Empowerment Scholarship Account program. So what happened in 2010 is that a group of parents, hint, hint, listen to when I say parents, probably talking about most of you in the room, because I'm looking towards Virginia next as we talk about this. So parents went to the legislature and said, the public school system isn't working for our children. We need an alternative. They said, what about the tax credit? What about the charter schools? Fine, we understand that those are available. We're looking at those and it's not working. We need, this child learns individually, uniquely. Some of them had special needs, some of them didn't. So the conversation started at the legislature where they can begin to talk about how they can help parents. So I'll back up a little bit. In 2009, the lawmakers started talking about having a voucher. And the voucher was where the state gives the money directly to a school. And they found that in Arizona to be unconstitutional. So they backed up and said, okay, we're not doing vouchers. So then they looked at it again and said, we want to empower the parents. So we're going to give the money from the state to the parents. And how it works is 90% of just the state money that the state would send to a public school district for this pupil would go to the parents for that child. 10% stays back in the general budget at the state, saving the taxpayers. Federal money and local money continue to go to the public schools, even though they don't have to educate them. So $14,000 total per pupil. About $7,000 goes to the parent. The other $7,000 stays back. So I'm not going to say anything about the unions, but they get to keep, the public school system gets to keep that money. So does that make sense? Okay, great. So that's what an empowerment scholarship account is. The reason why it's wildly popular in Arizona is because it went through stages for the past 10 years up until this year. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I want to talk about how we look at the classifications, because I know we have a lot of homeschoolers, especially here. Excuse me. And I want to explain a couple of things. Taxpayer funds can go to the public district schools, the public charter schools, and ESAs can go for private home, micro, pod, and hybrid schools. You know, post-COVID, we have all kinds of iterations of private school now. So there's all of those. The private funds out of your own pocket, definitely can go to the ones on the bottom, which are the private home, micro, pod, and hybrid schools. However, there was a conversation at the legislature because homeschoolers, that's a different definition in our by law. So we can't call those who want to homeschool with ESAs homeschoolers. So they're home educators. It's the same thing. You're doing exactly the same thing. It's just the fact of the title because of the state law. Many conversations were had, at the very beginning, that we don't want any strings attached to this money. And that was extremely important to us parents. And again, I was an ESA mom for 9 years, and now I'm actually running the state's program. So you might hear me speak as a mom, and you might hear me speak as the director as I go back and forth. But early on, we said, we're not going to do testing requirements. We're not going to use curriculum that you approve, because you're the state and I know my child. So from the very beginning of Arizona's program, the accountability for academic outcome is solely on the shoulder of the parent, where it should be. The first and primary educator of our children are that child's parent, and that's where it stayed. The only accountability that, and I think is the most important because we're talking about funding, is of the tax dollars. So these tax dollars are 100% accountable to be used for educational purposes. And we can talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So when the legislature first passed in 2011, they didn't have the will or the votes to be able to pass it universally for all children. So we had to start small. And so we started with special education and different categories. I just listed the different categories over the years. One was added the next year, and then the next year. And then there was siblings of anybody who has an ESA, and those who go to DNF rated schools, who live on an Indian reservation, just chipping away at it. But every year, in the public testimony at the legislature, parents pushed for universal, but we didn't have the votes. We didn't have the ability, or the legislature didn't have the will to do it. And then COVID happened. Silver lining of COVID, parents woke up, especially in one of your counties here in Virginia. We all saw that all over. I live in Maricopa County, which I'm sure you've heard about in the past year or so. And so the parents woke up and became the first educators of their children again. Even if they just dropped them off at public school, picked them up from public school, you know, there's nothing wrong with public schools. We need strong, healthy ones. I'm not an either or, I'm a both and. Strong, healthy public schools and ESAs. And so parents woke up during COVID to what is happening in my child's life, sat around the dinner table a little more often when we're all sheltering in place, and re-examined, I think, what is happening with their education. So when that happened, parents began to go to the legislature again and say, okay, enough is enough. We've been doing this for 10 years. Please, legislature, put the pedal to the metal, and let's get this passed for every single Arizona student, K through 12, no qualifications. Over the years, there were things that just started stripping off the law. You had to be in a public school for 100 days before you could qualify for an ESA, because we wanted to make sure the public school system wasn't going to work for you first. And then it was 45 days. So the parents said, if we're going to pass this for everyone, then we want 0 days. We want no qualifications. And that's what happened. On June 24th, 2022, for me, it was like the World Series. When this passed, it was awesome. It was actually also the day the Dobbs case came down and Roe v. Wade was overturned. So that was like the Super Bowl for me on the same day. You know, it was just amazing. We got the votes and it passed. And then July 7th of 2022, so this is the post-expansion. July 7th, 2022, Governor Doug Ducey, who made this his top priority last year, passed this. So it's for, the state for many reasons has to slice out these categories, but preschoolers, if they have disability qualify, all kindergartners, and then first through 12th grade. I just say quick K through 12, but this is the way that the law was written. So it's for every single student, no matter what your demographic, no matter what you make, where you live, if you're a resident of Arizona. Now parents have the power to send their children wherever they want to go. The typical amount is about $7,000 if you're just a universal student, meaning a typical student. But if you think back to what I said about the 90%, if a child with extreme special needs goes to the public school, the state is sending, according to the disability graph, a certain amount of money, and much more money. So I know people who get, the public school system would send $40,000, and they're taking 90% of that. Now that's a lot of therapies, education, paraprofessionals, educational aides that mom or dad is taking on. It's a lot of work. Whereas the public school system would absorb that to the best that they can. For my son, wasn't able to happen. They couldn't properly diagnose his learning disability. So, we had to remove him. But that is what happens in the public schools, or is supposed to happen in our public schools. Now mom or dad becomes the primary, you're gonna navigate all of that. You have to manage all of it. So $40,000, 90% of that sounds like a lot. But at the same time, if you're hiring all the people that need to help your child, you're gonna become this full-time, manager of this education. But that is the intent of the legislature. I think we're to the next one. Many people say, how many people really in Arizona are on this? Pre-expansion, 11,000. Within the first month, 31,000. In fact, the parents overwhelmed and broke our state's website. They just kept breaking because thousands of people were going on at a time. As of Friday, 46,386. That's how many students are now in the program. We have 1.1 million in the public school system. And it's growing. We've done no advertising in the entire state. Not a minute, not a dime. So the minute this is advertised, is definitely, I believe, will increase enrollment. So as a mom who's advocated for this for years, I can't tell you how important it is that the community, and not somebody else, and not a group, and not a nonprofit, and not a list, you, figure out how, if you would like something like this, to advocate for it. There'll be people in this room that want to start, coalescing together and getting some groups together to be able to figure out how to help it here in Virginia. Over the years, we also had the opposition, the people who don't like this, because they want everybody in a public school. It's the unions. And of course, they, every year, didn't like the changes. But when the universal passed and the governor signed it, they decided to make a full-blown effort to undo what the legislature did. And in Arizona, that's a referendum where you get a certain number of signatures. They had to get 118,000. You have to get those signatures and then turn them in, and then it goes on to the ballot. Well, once anything in Arizona at least gets on the ballot, millions of dollars pour in from who knows where outside of Arizona to try and get the messaging to make sure that it doesn't, they get the votes they want. Knowing that this was going to happen, that's when I said, this is going to be a big battle. So I went out to one of the tables that they were trying to collect signatures at. And at that time, they were just saying things that were untrue to what I know the new law to be. So I gathered families from, my faith community and the pro-life community and families all over that I found and knew. And we, for the whole summer, 1,000 families statewide, were educating people before people signed that petition. And out of the 118,000 that they were supposed to get, they only got 86,000. So parents won. And when that law went into effect, that's when they broke the website. But we really knew we had to stand up for our kids at that time. It was an exhausting summer. I know that might not seem like a really big deal, but when it's 118 degrees outside, I don't even know if you can comprehend that, but anyways, just try it sometime. It's really difficult. But I'm really proud of the parents that stood up for their children, and they came from every single background. Parents who I would never educate my children this way or wanted to, doesn't matter, that's your child. We have to fight for your right to do it too. So there was every single political division, every single demographic, North, South Arizona, everywhere, came together. It was really like kind of a kumbaya moment. Like, I can't believe people are all coming together for this, because we haven't seen this in America, at least I haven't, in years. It was great. And so those same people voted for somebody who was pro-school choice to be our state's elected superintendent of public education. I think in Arizona it's an appointed position by the governor, but in our state it's elected. And when Mr. Tom Horn won, that's when he called and said, I know you're an administrator and you work in healthcare, but I was hoping maybe you would come run the program. And with no desire to ever do something like that, as an administrator, and as a mom who saw all the issues, I thought, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. And so I said yes. I started January 3rd, so I'm very new at this. But we have a lot of things to be able to grow and to be able to change. So yes, I've gone from a mom to a government employee. But since you're a faith-related civic organization, I will tell you, your faith can take you places you wouldn't expect. So don't say no before you know what he might be asking. All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the categories of spending work. It's probably hard to see, I'm sorry. This comes directly from the state law of what you can spend these expenses on. Everywhere, everything from tuition to textbooks, curriculum, fees. You can use it to pay the fees to test your children. You don't have to, report what the tests are, but just the testing fees. One thing that's really nice about this is you might not use all the funding every year. So it rolls over year after year, K through 12. And when your child graduates from high school, your child can use that extra funds, whatever's left over, for 4 years of post-secondary education. So that's a big deal. Trade school, college, they changed it many years ago. I won't get into the nuances of why, but this is for your child. And if your child's going to go on to continue to educate themselves, the state legislature in Arizona supports that. So that means if your child is applying for colleges, you can have this in the back of your mind. I'll explain to you how it works in just a minute. You'll see a couple of interesting point outs at the end here. The public transportation and computers is part of the new universal law, because the intent of the legislature is to put these children who receive an ESA on equal footing of what's already funded in public education, right? So they have a school bus to take them from home to school. So now you can use your ESA funds for transportation. You're not buying a new car, paying for your own gas or anything like that. But a commuter pass, rail, their commuter rail, a bus commuter pass, or even a Lyft or an Uber or something like that, some of the ride sharing. Just from your house to the school. You can't take it to the other places. Computer, same thing. Now the law, excuse me. The law also says you can't buy video game consoles and things like that, because that might happen too. So all of these things that you can use. And what happens is you apply, you give your birth certificate and proof of residency, and your child's in the program. It's as simple as that. It's like 4 clicks on the computer. You get a contract, and that's when you decide whether or not you want to do this. In the contract it says you have to abide by everything in this law, so read the law, right? And then you'll be a good steward of these funds. And so after you submit the contract, it comes to my office, and then I get all of those amounts. So it's broken down in quarters. So we fund each quarter. It goes into a digital wallet, and in the digital wallet, so we have issued the funds from the state. It's left the state, and then it's in a digital wallet the parent controls. So you have a login and password, and you go on and you can see it, if you can hit it. It's hard to see, but this is the current third-party vendor, kind of hard to see, that Arizona uses. It's called Class Wallet. That's the current one we use. There's 4 ways of spending the money. So when the money is sitting in this account, you can pay for something and get reimbursed. And through this system, you just upload link your checking account and say you paid for tuition. You have the proper invoice. You submit the invoice, and then in 72 hours, that money's back in your account. There is a direct pay option that if your school or tutor or gymnastics place, wherever your education is happening, signs up to be a direct vendor. Under laws, some vendors would have to have a certain kind of credential. For an example, if you're a teaching facility, one that comes to mind is like a Kumon Learning Center, that type of Sylvan Learning Center, those types of places, you have to be accredited. If it's an individual tutor, like a college student or whatever, there's no accreditation needed. So they would just log into this system, become a vendor, and then their checking account is linked here. So that when the parent negotiates the amount for tutoring, then that invoice gets uploaded here and pays that pay person directly. It's just that certain things have to be on the invoice, student's name, what it was for, things like that, simple. And that's important because when that gets paid out, it comes directly from the parent's digital wallet. That's the Class Wallet. The other 2 options are the marketplace, which when you go into the marketplace, there's about 25 stores inside of Class Wallet. One's Amazon, Staples, Lakeshore Learning, things like that. You can go on, choose educational items, click them just like you are in Amazon, and then when you hit submit, it comes to my office, we make sure it's educational, approve, and Amazon drops it to your door. So books and things that you can buy on Amazon, which what can't you buy on Amazon? Pretty much a lot. And then the last option is, if needed, there's a debit card, and it's kind of guided. The guardrails on that are that the MCC codes, the merchant codes, are specific to education. So you couldn't take it to Walmart or Costco because that's too broad of a merchant code. That you could just kind of do reimbursement. But I'm a deal shopper, so when I go to Barnes & Noble and I see some great books on sale, I may want to pay for them and just get reimbursed, or I could use that debit card, and then I just have to upload the receipt. And then we monitor that every quarter. That's why you don't get the next quarter funding until all your receipts are in and approved. So there is great accountability on the financial aspect of it. And then at the end of the year, it all just rolls over to next year. And the way Arizona has structured it, it's a renewable contract every year. You don't reapply. You just get your next one, and then you don't have to sign it. So many moms and dads, even yesterday, were asking me, what happens if the legislature changes the law and they require testing, and you have to be able to prove your test scores to the state? And I said, every year it's renewable. The legislature ends May, June. You can sign yours in July. If you don't like what passed, you don't have to continue. A lot of people don't realize, at least in Arizona, that you have that option every year. And your legislature is every year for a month and a half.
Depends on the year.
Depends on the year. So you would just have to pay attention to what's happening in your state government to know what is happening. The last thing I'll say before we go to questions is every state has a different tax structure, right? So for Arizona, the state did this, but we also have the federal and the local dollars, right? The local comes to our county and then that amount of money is distributed to the public schools. We don't get the local or the federal funding, just the state funding. So every state is different. If your state happened to have more of the willpower at the county level, probably not as much as the federal level, this is a conversation you could have there too. It's my dream one day that ESA students in Arizona would have much more of the funding that they deserve. If they're going to send $14,000 to a public school for my child, then I certainly would love that $14,000. And I know a lot of people think, oh, there's a lot of strings attached for the federal. Okay, we can leave the federal and the public schools. You can also talk about the county. And I know everything is different in each state, but that is something to consider too. Is it where do your lawmakers and your decision makers have an appetite for this? No matter what the appetite is, it's worthy of starting this conversation, especially with one of your counties here in Virginia who started that parental conversation loud and clear. I would hope that you could, join alongside them and say, let's move towards something like this. The only way it happened for us in Arizona is the parents showed up at the legislature and said, my child matters, and I'm the first parent, and I'm the first teacher as their parent, and let me tell you what I need. Let me tell you what my child deserves. And that, in an appropriate way, writing, calling, but most definitely showing up is really important. Even if you can't travel to Richmond, which we're going tomorrow, so we would appreciate the prayers to meet with your lawmakers. But if you can't travel, so meet with your representatives now and your senators, even at the county level. It's really important that people know, I like what Arizona did. How can I help you? And if you can learn how to integrate this type of activity, advocacy, into your life and not think you're just going to become a full-blown advocate of something, integrate it into your life, I think you're only going to literally make your community a better place because your children will definitely benefit. Because we all know one of my heroes always says, as goes the family, so goes the nation. And so when our families can have this freedom to educate our children the way we want and they need to be, we're only going to have a stronger community. So I want to open it up for questions, but I want to thank you for your attention and for listening to this presentation. So thanks. Now the most important part is answering your questions. So yes, are we using a microphone? I forgot. No. Nope, we're not. I'm going to repeat the question. Okay.
What is the definition of a qualified school?
Definition of a qualified school in the state of Arizona is a non-public district or charter school.
So it doesn't have to be accredited?
Does not have to be accredited. Yes?
You mentioned only K through 12. Are there years outside of that period, K through 12, such as college or pre-K?
The Empowerment Scholarship Account exists for K through 12 students, the way the Arizona legislature is funding public schools. So for example, the reason it's split out from preschool with disabilities and then kindergarten, then 1st through 12th, the reason it's split out that way is because Arizona funds kindergarten half day. So kindergartners would only get the same type of half day funding. So half of the 90% that come, they would send to the public district school. And then otherwise it's 1st through 12th. So for example, I know a dozen Arizona students that go to college here in Front Royal. And their parents who have siblings, they're just looking, to be able to use this in Arizona. They're definitely looking for teachers. Some of them run schools in Arizona. And so I know that they're also looking to be able to use it, whatever's left over after the 12th grade. But you can't apply after 12th grade. That makes sense? Okay. Yes.
Yes,
it sounds from the history that you were giving that Arizona was very forward-leaning on this. And what other states are forward-leaning, and where does Virginia compare to that?
Great question. Where does Virginia, Arizona is a leading state, on this issue. Thank you, we like to say that too. And where do other states stand? So, in 2019 was kind of known to school choice advocates as the school choice year because so much legislation passed. It's just very limited. And then 2020 happened, and then 2021 was an interesting year. We had a lot of school choice legislation. But now that Arizona's passed this, lots of states want to go as broad as we did to include every child. This past week, Iowa, the governor signed legislation very similar to this. I would say almost exactly similar, but it's a 3-year stepped-in program so that they don't just open it wide. So after 3 years, then they'll have a similar program. Utah signed something yesterday, but it's very limited. So it's not, but you have to start somewhere. We started 11 years ago and couldn't get the universal. So we had to start with one category of students. Wherever you can start, I would start. If you get nowhere at the state legislature, I would start at the county. I mean, if I lived in Virginia. I've seen 7 bills, I think, that are at your state legislature, and I think a few have died. But the ones that are continuing on, I'm just gonna go cheerlead them on tomorrow when we go to Richmond, because they just shouldn't stop. Even if you can't do it for everybody, it's really important to start now. I mean, the further you get away from that silver lining of COVID, you know what memory does, right? It's important you start now, and at the same time start with whatever you can. And I know that you guys can do it. I mean, people in Warren County, you're special. Let me just say that. So I definitely think so. We've seen Arkansas, Oklahoma. There's a number of states that are trying, but when they get up there and they say, oh, we might not want to do this, we want to do that, they're biggest advocates of these children, the parents, are not necessarily as active as we were in Arizona. That's what shaped the legislation we have today is parents. So most states I've talked to lawmakers who say, we could never pass that. We would have to have this, we would have to provide the curriculum, they have to be accredited, we're gonna need testing to prove this, all of these things. I understand, I just don't know the people there, and so you need to work with the people there. But in Arizona, it's kind of the Wild West. We just went for it, and we just said, these are our children, and this is what we want to do. So there are a lot of states. All you have to do is Google school choice anywhere, and you'll see a lot. Okay, yes?
Who controls the legislatures in the houses in Arizona? What party?
Right now, today, after the election, we have a 1-seat majority in the Republicans, with the Republicans in the House, and a 1-seat majority in the Senate. And then the other statewide races that just took off, everything just changed January, right? The governor, secretary of state, and attorney general are Democrat. The super It's funny you should ask about counties, because the conversations I had mostly since I've been in Virginia is that there might be an appetite at the county level to do an ESA. And I think that would set a huge, wonderful stage to show the lawmakers at the state level, we want this.
And I could see it being a domino effect. Like if
It
our
would be
county
great.
does it, I could see another county, and then, just sort of expand from there.
And then wouldn't it be amazing if the state said, well, any county who does this, we'll match it with the state tax dollars. I don't know, I'm just thinking like things I've heard in the past couple of days. But know who your county supervisors are. Sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and say, would you be willing to do this for, our children? But our lawmakers too. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a relationship. Start with just a good rapport with those who represent you. My mom and dad did this just naturally, so I just thought everybody was friends with their elected officials, and so now, I know it's funny. Like Anthony will laugh in the back of the room because, I know everybody from town council to Congress, and they're just my friends now. But I am that odd person who does that. But it's really important, especially where your heart is, that you do. Our public school boards are very important, huge. You want to reform that system, it's going to take a massive uphill battle, but we have to do it. And the very first person to join me in this battle this summer was somebody I had just met. My husband and I met him, I think, one time, and he was running for public school board. And the unions were out there going, you hate public schools, you're never going to get elected if you're pro-school choice. So you have to get behind your school board member candidates in a big way, because we need that to reform as well. He won, and he was the second vote getter, top vote getter. I mean, people want choice, but they also love the public schools, and that's okay too. So don't think that those are at odds, because they're not. I really encourage you to find the people who are running locally, look at their website, see who's pro-school choice, pick up the phone and call them. If you like them, start talking to them about these things, county level and all. Yes?
I'm in Fredericktown, but I don't know if maybe our house is born now, but like you have kind of like a printout or something, or like that you could just kind of to start off like bringing it up with a legislator or something. Like, do you have anything like that that would kind of help?
I don't, but I'll make one for you.
Like, I'm not familiar with any sort of like ESA.
Right.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Most people, when you say an ESA, think educational savings account. And that's common. Arizona calls it empowerment scholarship account because we're about empowering parents. And I actually love, I have to just commercial for a minute, for the Department of Education. Can't believe I'm giving this, but it's commercial. Our new mission statement is that we are a service organization committed to increasing academic outcomes and empowering parents. So the academic outcomes is because Arizona's test scores and everything have plummeted on every level in the 40s. It's pretty low. So that needs to happen in our public schools. But when it comes to empowering parents, it's important too. I don't have anything written out that would be specific to Virginia, but I certainly would be willing to help you. If you say, just give me the definitions of these things, how it works, kind of a 2-pager, I can do that, no problem. Then I can have it, I'll do it on the plane on the way home and email it to you. How's that? Okay. Yes?
Thank you for my question, but maybe this is obtuse, but I was thinking when you said before that in Arizona it's $14,000 per student, $7,000 goes to the ESA, $7,000 goes to the school. How do the unions have a platform to complain? Couldn't that go towards boosting their pay? Or like they're still getting $7,000, so isn't that a good counterpoint to them? Like, hey, you're still getting this $7,000. Like, couldn't it boost their? I don't know. It's still good for them. It seems great to me.
So $14,000
You're
go
not using it on a kid, so
Right.
it's just free
money. So, exactly. So the question is, what about the $14,000 that goes to a public school pupil, and you're taking $7,000 out for an ESA student, and the other $7,000 stays behind? What leg does the union have to stand? Well, the funny thing is the moment you brought that up on I'll call it the sidewalk this summer, all of a sudden we have bathroom breaks and people who need water and they can't talk about it. And so that became our 20-second commercial, And I trained the parents like, we're Americans, right? We are so nosy, we want to know everything. So as they walked up to the table, then they're saying, we want to change this because it'll take billions of dollars away from the public schools. I mean, we would literally stand back and then walk up. Our sign said, don't sign this till you know what you're signing. We'd walk up and say, when you're done, we'll give you a quick alternative view. And then when we backed up, they go, and then they go on, and and then they walk over, and then I would tell the parents, 20 to 30 seconds, don't babble, just tell them, and told them exactly that. They keep $7,000. $7,000 is going with our child. Everything you're being told right here is not true, right? And all of a sudden, they just didn't want to deal with the parents anymore. And there's this slogan going around the country. It's like a hashtag too on social media, to fund students, not systems. So every single time we would say, it's about funding the student and point to the kids. The union would go, not the system. Yes, exactly. They would be so tired of hearing it that they would say it. We agree with that. They should. And anyways, we're looking at structures versus our children, right? And so it's just a matter of being educated on things so that you can battle back. And humble enough to know if you don't understand it and they prove you wrong, say I didn't understand it that way. When parents, you're nervous when you don't get things, and I don't want to say something wrong and I'll be on the evening news. I'll say something right and you'll be on the evening news too. Nobody wanted to be on the evening news. But you have to have your points down and get a 2-pager to understand it to begin to talk about it. It all starts with education, of course. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, follow up on that. So have you done like an assessment of what the actual financial impact of this on the public schools has been? And now that you're like a year into this program, I mean, if it brought students, if it incentivized students to leave the public schools, it should make the public schools more financially viable, because now you have this student who you're getting $14,000 for, or now you're only getting $7,000 for, but you're not educating them. So you have $7,000 free dollars per student who leaves, right?
Well,
So do you have like a?
Well, this law went into effect September 30th. So we've only had this a few months. But we went from 11,000 to 46,000 in a couple of months. So a few months. So we don't have that impact yet.
Right.
But it's on our list, of course, as soon as we do that.
Right.
But if you think about it, when you look at it from the state's eyes, it's cheaper to educate, and I'll look at it from a taxpayer. It's cheaper to educate a child with an ESA than it is to go to a public school. So when we would tell people, this saves the taxpayer dollars, and you can literally point in 10 seconds to how, people liked it. And to one of your points, I was going to say this, so many, probably about 30, public school teachers were at the table being asked to sign. And then we didn't know they're school teachers. So we would say, let us tell you why not to sign in just a second. They would turn and say, walk with me over here. And they would say, I'm a public school teacher. I have 35 kids in my classroom, and I can name 3 right now who need an ESA. They were pro-ESA. They know not everybody has a one-size-fits-all education, right? Lining up at the desks and teaching lecture style and all these things. Like, it's really important that we get to the heart of issues and stop talking politics. Because when we start talking the actual issue, that's when we were successful. I don't know if that helps a little bit, too. Yes?
Thank you for coming. This has been really eye-opening and wonderful. My question is actually about the designation of the fund once a year. This might be too in the weeds, but so you already have a child who's at a private school, for example, and that private school basically can provide for educating the child and helping to pay their staff, but not much else. Can you designate that funds, like some of your funds that you get towards, let's say, equipment in the school, like gym class? Because you're saying that I can put it towards like my kids' gymnastic lessons. So if it's something within the school, can you do that? Or can you help get equipment,
Can you use your I'm just going to repeat it for those who are watching. So for those who are in public or private school, is it for tuition only, or can you help buy equipment and refurbish a classroom or whatever with the funds?
Something that's specifically education
Right.
related.
Well, that would come in a tuition, right? So when you have a tuition and there's a gym fee, I'm just going to make something up, a gym fee or field trip fee or whatever it happens to be, all of that, those fees are covered. So if you wanted to buy equipment, you couldn't. But if the funding for the school, if the tuition went up a tiny bit to be able to cover that, to be able to provide it for the students, that's freeing up money from what they have for you paying tuition at the full amount. So I don't want to say it's fungible, but when you're paying something full price and everybody's paying, it just leaves the extra money the school had to do the other things they needed to. So in that way, I heard from tons of pastors that once ESA started flowing into their schools, their plate collection went up because the parents had money. I said, well, I'm free market, whatever. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. Yes.
Just to answer some of these too, just from the union standpoint, there's 2 dominant themes amongst the union leaders with homeschooling and school choice. Number 1, in private, when it was budget time, free money. At New York State, it was $22,000 per student. We had hundreds of students that we didn't have to educate, but we still get the money. So that was good. Second dominant theme was they hated it because we couldn't tell them how to think, how to live, how to talk, how to be what they wanted, which you can probably guess because I'm trying to keep politics out. And third thing somebody asked about, you said that 30% of them were homeschooling teachers or in school choice. If you are found out to be school choice, you are punished. I was punished. You would suffer for it. There wasn't a whole lot they could do, depending on how your union contract was, but there were things that made it uncomfortable. So it's nasty.
That's the reason why they walked away to talk
Yep.
with me.
Yep.
Because
when
they
you
cannot
said
be
that.
known
Yep.
to be a public school teacher, and there's too much pressure with the unions, you know. But one of the other cheerleaders in the country for this, he goes on Fox News a lot and he says, the unions have been dealing with education for years, but in Arizona, the students now have a union, and it's the parents. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's us. Yeah, that's exciting, right? Right, that's cool. I've never thought about it in that way, because I'm thinking more individual. Yes?
Just a quick question, we know vouchers are technically illegal in Virginia?
I don't know how your state constitution is set up, so I don't know if vouchers are unconstitutional here, but I might ask tomorrow. And the person I'm going down there here tomorrow with Dr. Brigida, I'll have him bring the message back up to Warren County.
Thank you.
Yes?
Have you talked a lot of, I guess, a lot of people like Tim Pool and Joe Rogan get a lot of message out there. It sounds like that would be something they'd be very much well interested in talking about, as well as pushing a message out there.
Right, I am happy to talk to anyone all of the time, as long as they can speak English, because I don't speak any other language. So that, I tell people that all the time, because they always say, you need to talk to this person or that person. I mean, I didn't plan to talk to Mike Tyson, but the people who need to hear about this, I'm just one person, so I certainly am happy to talk to anybody all of the time. And one other little silver lining of COVID is this online Zoom thing that happens, and now I'm getting better at it, so if there's people that want to know about it, I'm happy to help, always. Mike, you have a question?
I just have a snack.
Oh, we have snacks over here. I love that. And you can't use ESA money for food, sorry. Mom and Dad has to buy the snack. Oh yes, go ahead.
A lot of times in the small private schools, one of the parents will be a teacher, and that will cover a good part of tuition or all of tuition. So if tuition is not the issue, but then there are a lot of things that aren't available in the small schools, like music, language, athletics sometimes. So could it be used for those things? And sometimes private language, private music lessons are pricey. What if I'm my child's language tutor or music teacher? I don't know, can you say something about that situation or something?
Sure. I'm hearing two things there. The first is about the private school, and sometimes the mom is a teacher and their kids are going to the school. So tuition's not an issue. In fact, this happened to my daughter's school. She goes to a hybrid Catholic school, and the director said, okay, we still need you all, because the teachers are only parents. They're all highly educated. And he says, I don't want you all leaving now that tuition is not an issue, because you're going to get the break, and now you're saving for college. So he kept them all. So that was really smart of him. But the second part of it, the funding that goes to, are you saying, okay, so you cannot use ESA funds. They cannot go to yourself, the child's parents, grandparents, siblings, or anyone living in the household. So outside of that. But if you're at the school and you're teaching, and it's in part of the tuition, you can do it through tuition.
But not at home, if you're the private tutor.
Right, the tuition, the funding you're going to get for as a homeschooler can go to curriculum, a lot of different things, but not you as a tutor. Right, good question.
Christina, if I can just interrupt for a minute. We've got 5 more minutes before Christina has to leave for another speaking engagement tonight. So before her son comes up for some closing comments, I want to thank you very, very much for coming this evening. We knew she was coming a couple months ago for another reason yesterday, and we were able to arrange this meeting. I have become such a fan of hers. I sat through an hour presentation that she gave last August. It was unbelievable. I said, this is somebody we need to bring into Front Royal. Ted Cruz says school choice is the human rights issue of this decade, and I think we've lit some fire here tonight, and hopefully we can progress from here in a lot of different areas. So 5 more minutes, and then her son will wrap it up.
Thank you, Colonel. Anybody else have any other questions? That is actually my direct phone number to my office and my email. So I'm not going to be, I will get back to you if you have any questions. Go ahead.
With your experience applying it to Virginia, if we had a choice between a popular referendum on a ballot or having this done through the legislature, which would you suggest?
In Virginia, that's a great question, because your parents are wide awake. Right now, probably through a referendum, you get done faster. The problem is you're going to have to organize statewide. But I like the idea, I always like the idea of the legislature because that's the way it's supposed to work. But I don't know if you're all connected enough to your own lawmakers to be able to really push this down in Richmond. So I don't know, I think if it was me, probably a referendum, but maybe both.
Are you planning to meet with enough people tomorrow that you would have a better idea tomorrow to answer that question?
That's a great question. Yes.
And what you-
I think we have several meetings. I'm not sure exactly who because I'm just running at this point, but we will be there. But I will send, Dr. Brigita's going down with me, so I'll make sure I send that message back up with him. So I would contact him. Okay. One more question. And then it's time for snacks. Okay. Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you again, everybody that's here. Obviously, there was a lot to learn. I mean, I know it all like the back of my hand just because I live with her. I will say, I didn't benefit from the ESA program. I have benefited from Arizona's state tuition tax credit program, which had been around for 20 years, or has been around for 20 years. But just to illustrate how important this is and impact that it has, these programs have across the whole country, even in the most minute ways. If it wasn't for the ability for my parents to send me to the private Catholic school that I graduated from, not Seton Catholic down the road, Seton Catholic in Arizona, I wouldn't be here in Warren County going to Christendom College. I wouldn't be back in the Commonwealth. I wouldn't be pursuing what I love. And to that I'm eternally grateful because it really was a challenge in order to get through that. So I thank my mom for that, and I'm glad to. I was born here in Virginia, as I said, so I consider myself a son of the Commonwealth, even though I moved away when I was 2. I'm proud to be a son of the Commonwealth and to be back here in the great state of Virginia. But a lot of what these questions that we keep on bringing up is, and they're being asked all across the country, are questions like what concerns do you have about your kids? What concerns seem to go unheard of in the community? Over in Loudoun County, there's perfect examples of that over there. And it was brought up earlier tonight about local groups starting up and what coalitions can we build. And there's actually one here in Warren County that is will be arriving here sometime soon. And that would be the organization Moms for Liberty. And that just about wraps things up for this evening. Thank you all for coming out here. There were some questions earlier about if keeping track of these things and see where ways of letting everybody here know about where things are here in Virginia and across the country. And one of the groups that can help do that is the Front Row Catholic Civics group. So they'll be following it closely. So if you would like some more information on it, feel free to sign up for their emails. And thank you all for coming.
Where can we find the video footage, the full video footage?
OilExaminer.com. Yes.